Welcome, everyone. My name is Dana Bartocci. I'm this year's MWL president, and I have the honor of having two Rosalie Wahl lectures. If you are familiar with MWL, you know we have lots of events every day. You can go on our website and check them all out. I, in fact, went to a fabulous one on parenting today on how to get your child to do what you tell them the first time. I think it's going to take more than an hour for me to figure that one out, but so there's a whole bunch of events, but two of our cornerstone events, of course, are our winter celebration that we just had, focusing on generations, and our Rosalie Wahl lecture in the fall. This fall, unfortunately, Tammy could not join us. She got sick, but she lent us her presentation, and we had a good time learning all about the After the JD study, the longitudinal study that the NALP Foundation has put forth. And this spring, she offered to come back to help us out and explain to us some more research that the NALP Foundation has been working on with mentoring. A lot of people suggested that mentoring was a great topic to discuss. And the NALP Foundation, the National Association of Legal Professionals, it's changed a couple times, is my professional organization. I work for the University of Minnesota Law School, and it's great to bring what I bring from an alternative career, the study of employment and statistics and professional development, to the world of law as well. So I'm very excited that when I asked Tammy to come, she was more than willing to come. And Tammy is the CEO and president of the NALP Foundation for Law Career Research and Education, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the research and education on lawyers, careers, and law as a profession. So if you didn't know that there was someone actually out there doing this research, there are plenty of them. Ms. Patterson directs and oversees all aspects of the work of the NALP Foundation, from its research initiatives to its publications, programs, and fundraising. Ms. Patterson represents the Foundation's interest in a host of industry venues sharing the latest information on lawyer careers. Before joining the Foundation in 2008, Ms. Patterson was the Director of Recruiting and Professional Development at Gardner, Wynn & Sewell in Dallas, Texas for over 13 years. So she'll have a little bit of different accent than I do. She also is used to different weather than I am. She serves as a board of directors of NALP and the NALP Foundation's parent organization and the National Professional Development Consortium. Very thankful to have Tammy here and to share her wisdom and the research that has gone behind mentoring. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you all. And I will start by apologizing for not making it back in the fall. I'm pretty sure if I had gotten on a plane that day, my head may have exploded. So I had ear infections and all kinds of stuff going on. So, but I'm very thankful that you all invited me back. And I appreciate Dana taking the lead in my absence and talking about the AJD study last fall. But I wanted to bring you all some new, pretty much hot off the press information from our most recent study that was started back in 2012 on the state of mentoring in the legal profession. Before we get into that, just a little bit more background on the NALP Foundation. We are actually a separate organization. We're a sister organization to NALP, which is the organization that Dana talked about. We are a 501c3, so all of the funding for our research comes from contributions from law schools, law firms, and corporate legal departments, and other organizations that are within the legal profession. The folks at Thomson Reuters and West Legal Ed Center are supporters. We've done projects with the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. Obviously, NALP, our sister organization, it supports us as well. We have a separate board of governors, board of trustees. Again, those are made up of law school deans, law firm partners, and general counsel. Our current chair is Tom Sager, who is the chair, who is the general counsel at DuPont. So we're very excited to have him for the next 2 years leading all of our work. And I'm also very happy to have here with us today Jennifer Mandery, who is our director of research for the foundation. And this is a great opportunity. There are 3 of us on staff at the foundation. I'm in Dallas, Jennifer's here in Minneapolis, and our new senior vice president is in DC. So this is a great opportunity for Jennifer and I to catch up. So I'm glad to have her here today, and may call on her a little bit if there are questions about some of the research. So the state of mentoring in the legal profession. This is like I said, a survey, a study that we started back in early 2012, and we really wanted to look at mentoring from a number of perspectives. You know, not just what's going on in large law firms, but we also wanted to look at what law schools may be doing in terms of mentoring. And we knew that bar organizations, both state and local, county bars, and the like, were starting to develop some mentoring programs, some of which in about 5 different states are actually mandatory programs for newly admitted lawyers. So we wanted to look at that as well. And then we wanted to look at it beyond just the administrative part of running a program in these organizations. We wanted to actually go out and survey lawyers, practicing lawyers, and law students and get their perspectives on mentoring and the benefits of being involved in a mentoring relationship. So we're going to talk about a number of things today. I'll give you a little bit of study, the overview of the research study. We'll talk about mentoring and kind of from the lawyer and the law student perspective and why it's important. And then we'll look at the administrative aspects of law firm mentoring programs, law school mentoring programs, bar-sponsored programs, and then finally we'll take a look at some of the responses that we received from lawyers and law students who participate in the study, with a particular focus on primary mentors, and I'll get into that in a little while. And that, I think, revealed some of the most compelling data that we received back from this study. So generally, this is how our survey participants for each of the different factors, each of the different surveys played out. We had 159 law firms participate and 50 law schools. And I say administrators because the folks completing the survey, answering the questions, were people within those organizations who were responsible for the oversight or the administration of their mentoring programs. And then you'll see there our breakdown of both lawyers in the private and the public sector, law students, and then 41 bars from either state, county, or local bars also participated. One of the main reasons we decided to take on this research stemmed from a prior project that we had done with the folks at Thomson Reuters and West Legal Ed Center, which looked at professional development in law schools and all the different initiatives and what law firms are doing with respect to professional development. And so one of the questions we asked in that study was to have law firms tell us how they were prioritizing their various professional development functions. And there was a long laundry list of things that they could choose from, probably 25 different things. And this list here is their top 5 priorities over the next 24 months. You see client relations and development training, lawyer performance management, integration and orientation, substantive legal training, and development and management of core competencies or benchmarks. So as another part of this particular project, we asked associates within those law firms of all the professional development functions that were available to them within their organizations, how did they prioritize what was important to them and what was the most beneficial? So here are our responses, our top 5 responses from the associates. Work-related or on-the-job training was number 1, followed closely by formal and informal mentoring. Well, if you remember, formal and informal mentoring was not on the law firm list. As a matter of fact, it was way, way down the list. So we got to thinking, you know, there's a disconnect here because either firms are not prioritizing, they're clearly not prioritizing this, and is it because they feel like they already have a well-established program and it's running fine and they don't need to spend you know, time and effort improving that over the next 24 months? Or are they just not listening to their associates or don't understand how important this function is to the associates within their firm? We didn't know the answer, so that's one of the reasons, the main reason that we decided to undertake this particular study on mentoring. So as we got into the study, we decided, you know, we really have got to, for the purposes of definition across the board, for all of the various survey instruments that we're going to use, we have to decide what we're going to use as a definition of formal mentoring and informal mentoring. So these are the definitions, and I won't read them all to you, won't recite them to you, but we had a standard definition for formal and informal that we used in every single survey. We also did a lot of outreach, talking to law schools and law firms and bar associations to come up with a list of what we thought were the most common models for mentoring. The traditional one-on-one that most of us are familiar with. There are some law schools and law firms that do situational mentoring, so depending on the subject matter, the mentee may go to someone else. So it really depended on the issue. Network mentoring, and then the circle and group mentoring, where there may be a group of people, 1 or 2 mentors and a group of mentees, and they you know, benefit by being able to talk to their mentors individually, but also benefit from that group setting because they're realizing that other people in their position may have some of the same issues that they do. So these were kind of the 4 main models that we found were most prevalent in our profession. So this gives you an overview of the question, which was our very first question to all the law firms, the law schools, and the bar organizations, of whether or not you currently have a mentoring program in place. And you can see that, you know, the vast majority of law schools and law firms had a mentoring program in place. The bar organizations, slightly less, but for the most part, there's a lot going on from a program standpoint in our industry. So now let's take a look specifically at some of the key points from the law firm administrative mentoring survey. So when we asked the 159 law firms who participated, 68% said that their program was formal in nature. So it had some type of structure to it, someone was monitoring it, there was probably a system in place where folks were paired with their mentor, so very formal. 29% said it was informal, so they encouraged mentoring to be taking place, but there was no, you know, not a lot of oversight and tracking and that type of thing. We also, again, gave them a long list of things to, possible priorities or efforts, initiatives that they were striving for in their mentoring program. And this lists the top 3. Number 1, very close to integration of new lawyers. Integration and orientation was supporting lawyer development and advancement. And then slightly below that was supporting and developing legal skills specific to practice area. We also ask firms to tell us if they had aligned their core competencies to the extent that firms had formally developed core competencies and benchmarks, whether or not they had integrated them into their mentoring program. And of the firms who said that they do have core competencies and benchmarks, 53% said that they are aligned with their mentoring program. But there were still 36% of the firms who said they had not even established core competencies and benchmarks in their firm yet. Please feel free at any point if you have questions. I can take questions during or after, so please feel free. If there's a particular slide that comes up that you have a question about, just let me know. Then we ask a series of questions on, that oversight and what's going on. To what extent are you following up to make sure that these relationships that something's actually taking place, that people are actually even talking to each other, and other aspects of that. So this gives you the breakdown here, and this was somewhat surprising that the numbers were so high. In every category where the answer was no or that they didn't know. 61% of the firms said that they do not regularly track and monitor interaction between mentors and mentees. 93% do not use any form of technology to manage their mentoring program. 69% said that they do not have any kind of reward system in place to reward mentors for their time and efforts. And just over 3/4 said the lawyers in their participating in mentoring program, that only 24% of the lawyers in their firm participate in a mentoring program at a bar or judiciary organization. We also ask about budgets in law firms. So what if you have a dedicated budget or not? 63% said that they do not have a budget specifically dedicated to mentoring. But for those firms who did have a budget, you can see here the range. Almost half of the budgets were $10,000 or less. This is just devoted for mentoring. Obviously, these numbers go up the larger the firm, and we did have 6% of the firms who have a budget of $250,000 just for mentoring, but those firms tend to be 500 lawyers or more, so that's understandable. So looking now at law school programs, mentoring programs, and we'll do a little compare and contrast here. Looking at, again, at budgets, only 29% of the law schools who had mentoring programs said that they had a dedicated budget. But then you look at the budget ranges, and they're significantly lower on the law firm side, although there are just as many students, probably more students to accommodate than law firms have associates in many of these cases. So over half of the participating law schools said that their budget for mentoring was between $1,000 and $5,000. So obviously there's not a whole lot you can do with, with that amount of money. Sure.
So that you can give us a sense when we get these numbers for the law firms or the law schools as to what it means on an average per attorney basis. So looking across at all of those law firms responding, was it an average of $300 a year per attorney for that budget allocation?
We could figure that out. What we did here in the study, in the report that we released, it's broken down by firm size. So firms, and it's also broken down, I believe, Jennifer, by maybe it starts at 10 or more, 10 to 25, I can't remember, and goes all the way up to over 1,000. So we've got several categories there of breakdown in law firm size, so you can look at that average number and figure out what the cost per attorney is. We were also curious from the law schools, how were they recruiting their mentors, and who were they recruiting to serve as mentors? And this gives you a breakdown of the percentage of the different folks who are serving as mentors to law students. They were using alumni, obviously quite a bit, practicing lawyers who may not be alums of the school, members of the bench, state and local bar members. Only 12% of law schools said that they used faculty to serve as mentors. And one of the things I thought was interesting is that there were slightly more schools who were using 2 Ls than 3 Ls as mentors, which I thought was somewhat interesting. So looking now at bar-sponsored mentoring programs. One of the things we learned early on from the bar associations was that they haven't really been thinking about this. There were very few who have been thinking about mentoring programs and had anything well established for any length of time. And that really played out in our results. We found that the majority of the participating bar organizations had a mentoring program for less than 5 years. So they are really still trying to figure out how to make this work as well. And I think the biggest challenge for the bar organizations is finding people to serve as mentors. And getting their newly admitted lawyers, to the extent that there's just, as I mentioned, a handful that have mandatory programs. For those who have the voluntary programs, even getting those newly admitted lawyers to participate. Many of them are involved in programs within their firms, and I don't know if it's a time constraint or what, but when we get to talking about primary mentors, there's an interesting thing that came out of the numbers. So this slide shows participation as a mentee in bar-sponsored programs. So you'll see more than half of the bars said that less than 10% of their membership participates as a mentee. And then that number goes up when you look at participation as a mentor. 93% of the bar organizations that participated said that less than 10% of their membership serves as a mentor or is willing to serve as a mentor. So that's, from the bar organization standpoint, they really have some great initiatives and great ideas, but they are really struggling with their membership to encourage participation on both sides of the equation, both their newly admitted lawyers who would be the mentees and their more experienced lawyers who could serve as mentors. So moving on to looking at some of the perspectives that we got back from the law students and the practicing lawyers that we surveyed. This here shows you just participation. We ask, are you currently participating in a mentoring program? Close to 70% of the lawyers that we surveyed said that yes, they were, but only 44% of law students said that they were currently participating in some type of mentoring program. It didn't necessarily have to be in their organization. It was in a bar organization or otherwise. And then we ask for those who are participating in a mentoring program, what's the percentage of you who are participating in formal programs? So again, the practicing lawyers, and we did tend to have more on the private side and more of our pool who were in law firms of a significant size, 50 or more, but 67% of those said that they were in a formal program. And then on the school side, only 49%, so about half, it was about half and half there of the students who are participating in a formal structured program. So moving on now, we spent quite a bit of time in both of the law student and the lawyer survey focusing on the profile of what these folks would consider, who they would consider to be their primary mentor. So the person that they turn to most often, the person that they feel like that they benefit the most from in that type of relationship. And we had a series of questions that really got to what that person, who that person is, and how the mentee and their primary mentor, how that relationship works. So here I've just provided some highlights of our findings. On the lawyer side, 68% said yes, they do have someone they can consider to be a primary mentor. And of that 68%, 86% of those people said that their primary mentor is from inside their firm. But here's what I think is interesting. When you look at formal versus informal, 62% that said their primary mentor is from an informal relationship. So if you take into consideration that a good majority of our folks, of the lawyers who participated, were in firms of significant size, and most of those folks are in some type of formal program, these numbers lead me to believe that while they're part of a formal program, their primary mentor may be someone else. So it may be someone that wasn't initially assigned to them. So they're involved in a formal program, but the person they consider to be their primary mentor may be someone else still within the firm that they have reached out to or just developed a relationship on their own. Maybe someone that they work with on a regular basis who wasn't necessarily assigned to them as their formal mentor. But I think this does say a lot for that informal mentoring that we sometimes tend to forget about, the importance of that. On the student side, we asked those same questions. 61% of the law students said that they do have someone they consider to be a primary mentor. But more so than on the law firm side, than the practicing lawyer side, over half said that their primary mentor was from outside the law school. Again, while they may be part of a formal program, the law schools are probably using outside alums and folks in bars and organizations to serve as their mentors. And then on the formal versus informal, 70% of the law students said that their primary mentor is from an informal mentoring relationship. We also ask about pairing. So which of the question specifically was which of the following best describes how you were paired with your current primary mentor at your firm or organization. And you can see there that 34% said that they actually selected their own mentor, 31% said the firm or organization assigned their mentor, and then 20% said my primary mentor selected me as his or her mentee. On the law student side, just a little bit different. 34% selected their own, only 13% said that their mentor selected them. Then we were curious about just almost from a generational standpoint, how often these folks are meeting. And you see here that the green bar are the lawyers and the blue bar are the law students. So the lawyers are meeting with their primary mentors on a much more frequent basis than the law students are, not surprisingly. We also looked here at different forms of communication, and I don't have a slide on that. But we asked not only how often do you communicate with your mentor, but how are you communicating with your mentor? Is it in person? How often do you see someone in person? Are you communicating primarily by email or text or by on the telephone and that type of thing? Surprisingly, on the lawyer side, we found that a good majority of the lawyers were meeting with their primary mentor, quite often, 10 or more times a month. That's probably because they're paired with or have bonded with someone who offices very close to them. But on the student side, we found that a lot of the communication was by email or texting or that type of thing, a much more electronic, less face-to-face on the student side than on the practicing lawyer side. The good news is, with respect to primary mentors, almost all of the lawyers and law students that we surveyed said that they felt like this relationship was very beneficial in terms of their career development and advancement. We actually asked them to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 how they would view that relationship. So you can see there the vast majority in both categories rated their primary mentor relationship as either a 5 or a 4. And then finally, and I've included these in your handout, so again, I won't read them out loud to you, but these are some of the quotes that we received. We had a number of open-ended questions regarding mentor relationships that we asked both the law students and the practicing lawyers to answer. And I will say, by and large, we got many, many more positive responses than we did get negative. The negative comments that we did receive, I would say, and Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of those came from law firm associates who were assigned to someone, and it just never started, it never worked. I mean, you can read between the lines in these comments, but it was someone that they didn't really play a part in the selection process, and it just never really clicked. And so both the mentor and the mentee kind of went on their separate ways, and so the few negative comments we got were primarily from that type of situation within law firms. Any questions? There's a whole lot of more information. The publication is called The State of Mentoring in the Legal Profession. Like I said, it's hot off the press. I think I've had it in my hands about a week. But it does go into much more detail, as you were talking about, where both the lawyer responses and the law firm and law school administrative responses are broken down more by, for the law schools, geographic area and whether or not they're located in a major metropolitan area, which makes it much easier to find mentors and to get a program going. On the firm side, it's broken down again, like I said, by firm size, and so you can see wherever your organization fits into, kind of benchmark not only what your budget may be, but what other initiatives are going on there with peer firms of your size. So I would be happy to answer any questions. If it's something I don't know, maybe Jennifer does off the top of either of our heads. So any questions? Yes?
Is there a breakdown of gender?
Very good question. You know what, there is on the school side, the law student side, there's a breakdown of gender. We do not have a breakdown of gender on the firm side, and we have typically found that when it comes to professional development initiatives and things like that, there's not a huge difference in perspective between men and women. Mentoring, what I do know with respect to mentoring and gender is that there are many more male mentors than there are female mentors, and we've got, you know, a pretty equal number of, you know, new lawyers, men and women. So in many cases, I think a lot of women are paired with men just because there are fewer women in those leadership roles to take on mentoring responsibilities, in particular in law firms. Anything else? Yes.
When you measured for alignment on core competencies, did you gather information on what core competencies employers were looking for?
We did not, but we do have that. We didn't do that in this particular study just because we were focusing more on the mentoring initiative. But we did previously a study really just focusing on core competencies and benchmarks, and that's available. It's a free report. We did that in conjunction with the Professional Development Consortium back in, we actually did two, one in 2010 and one in 2011, to see what kind of progress had been made. But we go into those issues. You know, what exactly is it that you are designing? You know, what's important in your organization? So that's available. It's just go to our website and you can order it, and we just send it to you as a PDF. And like I said, it's free. And there's actually two of them. Like I said, 2010, 2011, and it shows you the progress made in that one-year time period when everybody was talking about whether or not they were going to go to a core competency and benchmark system. Yes?
All at kind of the requirements or the responsibilities of the mentor. You know, there's some publications recently about mentoring versus sponsoring, and what, you know, how those pairings are made and what the mentor is supposed to do for the mentee or mentor.
We talked, we didn't go into that specifically, but what we did cover is whether or not the organizations are providing any type of guidance or training for mentors and or mentees. So that is in there. We didn't really look at specifically what, you know, what's being taught in these to the extent that organizations do have training. We didn't look at what's being taught, but we've already, you know, since this has been out and we've started talking about it, have talked about a follow-up project, which would look at specifically what you are talking about. You know, I had been at a law firm for a number of years and was responsible for overseeing our mentoring program, and I always felt like, and I hope I don't offend anyone at a law firm when I say this, I'd always felt like we called what we had a mentoring program just because we needed to have a mentoring program, but really what it was an integration program. It was, and I think that's true of a lot of programs that are going on in law firms. When you really drill down, it's an integration and an orientation program. Now what we're starting to see law firms do is this separate initiative, which is sponsoring. So as people start to get more experience and getting closer to partnership, is there someone there that can help them through that process, and someone that will sponsor them when they are eligible to be considered for that position? So, and I think that's pretty rare, but like I said, I'm starting to hear some firms discussing that, but they're discussing it as a separate initiative from what they're calling a mentoring program. It's for more senior associates. Anything else? Oh, one more? Yes.
About the the formal mentoring programs versus the informal in this slide. Looks like page 31 and page 32, when it was revealed that the primary member is often an informal mentor
Yes.
relationship.
Students or law students or
Both, well,
Okay.
lawyers and law students. In looking at the formal mentor relationship, has there ever been issues raised of trust, so that in a formal relationship that maybe there's some sense that because it's a formal relationship and maybe it's at a firm, that there may be issues of trust, that if I ask such questions, it's going to get back to the people who do my reviews that I'm asking these, stupid questions, and so that the real ability to be transparent and honest really comes in the more informal ones.
Exactly. We didn't get into that specifically, but, my own personal experience, you're right on point. I think that happens in a number of cases. And it especially happens, I think, when in programs where mentors and mentees are paired within practice areas, the same practice areas. And so, there are a lot of firms who've done just the opposite. Their mentoring programs, they make sure that their mentees are paired with someone completely outside their practice area. So they end up, in a lot of cases, having a couple of mentors, one that they go to for kind of personal and career types of issues, and another that they go to for the practical skills piece. So we didn't look at that specifically. I think some of the kind of open-ended comments we got addressed that, but we didn't ask those specific questions. Do you remember anything in particular?
But a lot of the comments were, I have a go-to person that I'm comfortable with asking anything to.
And that's one of the benefits, I think, with these circle and group situations, firms that have been able to do that successfully. And honestly, I don't know of many, but there are some out there who have tried this approach. And it gives the mentees, again, this situation where they have fellow people, that their peers, who can ask questions too that they may have wanted to ask, but are a little bit afraid to. But then there are also multiple mentors within that circle that they can choose to go to for different issues. And so I think if it set up right, that there have been a few firms who have been very successful with that format. I will tell you, it's one of the things. One of the main reasons I wanted to look at this is because I had some thoughts just based on my own experience about mentoring programs in general, and of all the things that I've done in my career in law firms, that's been the hardest thing. I don't think I don't know that many firms out there have really gotten it right yet, and I think it's something we really firms struggle with. I think the bar organizations are struggling with it. The schools are struggling with it. It's just a really difficult endeavor, but it's so important that you can't stop trying. As frustrating as it may be, then the results that we got back from this study, in particular from the lawyers and the law students, you just got to keep trying, and encouraging people whatever you do, whatever you can do to encourage participation on both sides is something that's really just got to continue to happen, because from those who are benefiting from it, you can see that they think it's tremendously helpful in their careers. Anything else? Thank you all very much. I've enjoyed it. Great crowd. Good.
I want to offer our thanks to both Tammy and thank you to Jennifer. Both of them will be around, so you can have some snacks in the back, maybe find a new mentor or catch up with an not old mentor, A former mentor, thank you, but experienced mentor, whatever you might want to call that. Feel free to mingle and have some snacks and go ahead and chat with Tammy and Jennifer as well. Thanks so much. I also want to thank Dorsey and Whitney for hosting today, as well as all of our other fabulous firms and other employers that are sponsors, as well as the individual sponsors too. So thank you so much. And on the back side, there's all those fabulous events on the back side of Tammy's bio that I'm talking about that are coming up. So look at those too. Thanks so much.